Hey, and we're rolling. Take cut one. Okay, so, hi, I'm Janet Nguyen.
I'm Katherine Show.
And we're doing a podcast for our AP Psychology project on the one and only B.F. Skinner.
Woo woo.
Yay!
Skinner in the house.
Skinner in the house. Okay. Oh no. So, let's just dive right into it, okay?
So, Janet, do you have any, information on Skinner? Can you tell me anything?
I do have information on B.F. Skinner. So, basically, B.F. Skinner is a psychologist we chose, and I'm just going to give a brief history lesson about this guy, okay? About his family life, education, just like that, okay? So, his actual full name is Burris Frederick Skinner, all right?
Okay.
But his family, as a nickname growing up, he went by the nickname Fred because of his middle name, okay? And his birthplace was on March 20th, 1904. A fun fact, me and Catherine were born in 2004. So that means he's like a century older than us.
Wow. That's pretty crazy.
That's insane. And his birthplace is, you want to say that, Catherine? Susquehanna, Pennsylvania.
In the U.S.?
In the U.S., yeah. America. And he did unfortunately passed away on August 18, 1990. So that was 31 years ago. Yeah, quick math lesson. And he passed away at the age of 86. And cause of death was complications with leukemia, cancer, unfortunately. And his place of death was Cambridge. You want to say, Catherine? Massachusetts. Okay. Massachusetts. Okay. And let's go to his family life now. So he had a mother named Grace Skinner, and his father was named William Skinner, and his dad was an attorney, and his mother was a typist who gave her job away when she got married basically and had children. But she was also an accomplished pianist and singer. Both parents also they graduated second in their classes from high school.
It's pretty specific.
Yeah, second in class. Not first. Also, Skinner had a younger brother by the name of Edward, who unfortunately passed away at the age of 16. And the cause of death at the time was determined to be an acute indigestion. Yeah. But later in life, Skinner reasoned that the true cause had been a massive... You want to say that, Catherine?
What am I looking at? Cerebral hemorrhage?
Cerebral hemorrhage. And...
So that means a blood clot.
Yeah, basically. And...
Doesn't have to do with digestion.
Yeah. What a smart man. And yeah, passed away at the age of 16, left the family, including Skinner, in shock for a very long time. And his education was Susquehanna High School, Hamilton College, and eventually the one and only Harvard University.
Wow.
And his occupation was he carried out research at Harvard until 1936. Then he lectured at the University of Minnesota. Later he became chair of Indiana's University's psychology department in 1946. But later in 1948, he returned back to Harvard as a professor and spent the rest of his career there.
Yeah, wow, such an interesting guy, and he's had such a huge and profound impact on the way that psychology is studied today. What's even more interesting is why he chose, or how he chose, the field of psychology to study in the first place. So, actually, in 8th grade, Skinner became interested in William Shakespeare, even bought into the conspiracy that the true author of Shakespeare's works was Francis Bacon. He read further works by Bacon, including his famous Novum Organum, which described the Baconian method of doing science. Even in his freshman year, his favorite course was English composition, so in junior year he decided to major in English language and literature. By 1926, he had graduated with a Bachelor of Arts, and he had the intent of becoming a novelist. But by the end of the summer that year, Fred realized he could not write a novel for the life of him, and he began to consider an alternative future. He realized that novel writing was attractive to him, mainly because it involved the describing and analyzing of human behavior, so in November 1927, the next year, he decided to abandon literature, and he studied psychology instead.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a useful degree to go into something else after.
Yeah, so we're now going to dive into, in a little bit more detail, what it was that Skinner was so well known for.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
So, let's go into it, okay?
Go ahead.
So, B.F. Skinner was really best known for his theories on operant conditioning. He believed that behavior was mostly, if not completely, caused by the environment.
Yeah, in fact, he believed that there was no such thing as free will, and
That's crazy.
Behavior was only like a response of the environment, as Janet said, or just randomness. He believed that the mind should be studied through what could actually be seen, so the behavior that you could observe in a person, rather than thoughts going through the mind that couldn't be seen. Yeah, he thought those were anything occurring in the mind that you couldn't see was either a misconception or like totally irrelevant to science.
So, Skinner believed that behavior is more complicated than just the result of classical conditioning, but compared with Pavlov, who believed that classical conditioning is responsible for all behavior.
Yeah, so thinking about operant conditioning, Skinner looked at the causes of an action and its consequences, and that's what he called operant conditioning. He believed that classical as well as operant conditioning had an impact on behavior, so not just one or the other. He believed that they both play a part in determining a person's behavior.
So, Skinner was actually considered the father of operant conditioning, but actually based his theories on Edward Thorndike's law of effect.
Yeah, from 1898.
Yeah.
And of course he didn't just copy Thorndike's law of effect, but he did add to it, but he's more widely recognized for coming up with those concepts when in fact a lot of it came from Thorndike.
Wow.
Yeah.
Poor Edward.
Poor Edward. So Edward's law of effect was that behavior followed by pleasant consequences is more likely to be repeated, whereas behavior followed by unpleasant consequences is less likely to be repeated.
Also, Skinner added the term reinforcement, which is basically reinforced behavior is strengthened. Non-reinforced is more likely to weaken and die out.
Yeah, so what Jen is trying to say is that basically Skinner added this term reinforcement, which means that it used to describe reinforced behavior. So when you reinforce behavior, he said, it's strengthened. If you don't reinforce behavior, then it's more likely to weaken and die out, what we call extinction.
Exactly. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, so that was a bit about like Skinner's background and his theories and stuff, but let's talk more about specifically what ideas he had and how he tested and came up with them.
Exactly. So, Skinner studied operant conditioning using Skinner box used to condition certain behaviors in animals like pigeons and rats. And based on that research using Skinner boxes, he determined 3 types of operant responses that can follow a behavior.
Yeah, and it's also important to note that Skinner's box was actually quite similar to Thorndike's puzzle, so that's another similarity that he used by looking at Thorndike's research and theories. But so the 3 types of operants or responses that Skinner determined can follow behavior were neutral operants. So things that would not increase or decrease the possibility of a behavior being repeated. Then there were reinforcers, which would increase the likelihood of a behavior being repeated. So something like if you wanted to encourage the dog to shake his paw before he got his dinner, you would use a reinforcer to encourage that behavior. There are both positive and negative reinforcers, Skinner said. So positive occurs if the behavior is achieved. So if the dog shakes his paw, you give him his dinner, that's a positive reinforcer.
Yep.
A negative reinforcer occurs if it's not achieved. So if the dog refuses to shake his paw, then maybe you take away his food for the night.
Okay. And lastly, the third operant was punishers. So would decrease the likelihood of a behavior being repeated. So punishment does weaken behaviors but does not eliminate it completely. Behavior becomes suppressed and may surface when punishments cease. Less effective than reinforcers.
Yeah, so basically punishers, they do work temporarily, but the way that they work is by causing they work by decreasing the likelihood of a behavior being repeated. So if you want, if say the dog poos on the carpet and you don't want it to do that anymore, so you would use a punisher to stop it from doing that. The thing is, though, that punishers have been shown, they don't eliminate behaviors, they only suppress them. So when punishments cease, then behaviors may surface again. So they're less effective, actually, than reinforcers. Also, negative reinforcers and punishers can often be confused with each other. So the difference is that a negative reinforcer encourages a behavior, whereas a punisher discourages a behavior. So that's a little bit about the 3 types of operants or responses that Skinner determined can follow behavior.
Yes. So now I'll talk about the use of Skinner box to determine / prove these. So an example of how he used the Skinner boxes to determine that these operants exist and how it works was he might have a Skinner box that he puts a rat in, and in this box it has a lever that the rat can press on to get food. So in this example, the food is a positive reinforcer, which is employed when the rat does the desired action.
Oh yeah, well, in the action in this case is obviously pressing the lever. And then another aspect of the box would be a continuous electric shock, which would be a negative reinforcer that the rat has to press the lever to end. So the continuous shock would be the negative reinforcer, which would be employed when the rat wouldn't do the desired behavior, which is in this case pressing the lever. So the rat would have to press the lever to put an end to the shock.
Damn.
For rats.
Wow. So, and the one final thing that the box would have is a button that the rat could learn to press at a signal of a light being turned on. The rat could do this to keep the electric shock from ever happening, which we would call a learning response.
Yeah, so that's a bit about the actual box that he's pretty famous for, and how he used it. He did use it for pigeons as well. That wasn't the only experiment.
Yeah, and again, Thorndike didn't get any credit that much.
Nope.
Not once. But
poor old Edward.
Poor Thorndike. So, let's move on to why their observations / researches are important to modern day psychology.
Yeah, so one of some of Skinner's major contributions were that he completely helped found modern behaviorism by popularizing Thorndike's theories and bringing them greater attention.
Yeah. And as a result, the study of human behavior has become more widely recognized and explored aspects of psychology.
In fact, it's one of the major perspectives of psychology. So the fact that we're learning about it even now in a beginner intro course to psychology just really is testament to how big of an impact Skinner had on this.
Exactly. And that's why, like, in a lot of university courses, I know they talk about, like, major psychologists, because that's what psychology is about. But, like, and obviously, B.F. Skinner is one of the top psychologists being talked about. So that's pretty good.
Yep.
And, let's say it again. He discovered value in positive reinforcement and learning, still used today. An example, kids are rewarded with dessert for finishing dinner. So, like, if you don't eat your green beans, you don't get pudding.
Yeah, so, of course, that's only one example of, with the many uses of positive reinforcement, as it's so widely used in learning and in teaching your kids to be better and in training for, like, soldiers, but also dogs.
Exactly. Treats.
Which aren't humans, but they're dogs, so,
exactly.
You know.
He designed first psychological experiments to give quantitative evidence with repeatable and predictable results. And he's a big reason for the prevalence of experimentation for psychological research today, which is a large part of how we've discovered our understandings of the human mind. And nowadays, a huge part of the discoveries being made in psychology, and specifically the human mind, are achieved with use of quantitative research derived from repeatable experiments.
Which is directly linked to Skinner's work, which is crazy because if you think about it, Skinner didn't just give us behaviorism, he also gave us our modern way of experimenting.
Thanks, Skinner. So, on to the next part, which is how the findings have helped us understand people's behavior. Through Skinner's findings has helped us understand the impact on reinforcements versus punishments on teaching specific behaviors, the positive and negative reinforcements. They encourage to continue good behavior, and punishments deter from continuing bad behavior, which becomes suppressed but not eliminated.
Yeah, and so the application of this idea is that has been applied with lots of programs and plans for teaching various behaviors. For example, training soldiers, parenting children, or training dogs.
Animals.
But these programs and plans can be adjusted to increase their effectiveness, leading to better examples of specific behavior that is desired, and reducing that specific behavior that you don't desire.
And with morality, unfortunately, although this method can produce better children, etc., can also be used to unfairly manipulate and control people.
Yep.
So that's not
always
good.
Always a problem.
Yeah.
So another one of Skinner's findings, and the idea it helped us understand, was the extent of influence that the environment can have in shaping the behavior of an individual, and through that, at least in Skinner's view, shaping the individual themselves. So that idea, although not necessarily all true, that the environment plays a large part in deciding what the individual becomes or what they do, is, a big impact because it's been applied, right? Because we could consider now more often that the reason for the behavior of individuals, purposefully manipulated or not, can be attributed to situation as opposed to disposition. So to approach the issue of their behavior when problematic, it's wise to use that consideration, because you can end up being more helpful to them instead of shaming them for something that they did not purposefully do.
Mm-hmm. And let's get back to morality.
Yep.
This idea may be flawed, and in any case, there's possibly and likely not situational 100% of the time. Dispositional
Yep.
may be mistaken as situational and treated as such, then causing repetition of behavior.
Yeah, so what Jen is trying to say here is... Thanks, Janet.
Of course!
Basically, of course, this idea might be a little bit flawed, right? We don't know that situational is always the reason behind the problem. Sometimes it might be the person themselves and not their environment, so dispositional.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is the case, that it is dispositional, and you treat it as situational by not blaming them, which is probably not mostly the case, but if that is the case, then it ends up causing repetition of their behavior because they know it's okay.
Yeah. Let's talk about what are the aspects of their work
Yeah, and their research
that could be criticized.
Yeah,
Thank you, Catherine.
Could be or has been criticized. Let's talk a little bit more about
exactly.
that. Basically, the weaknesses of their work.
Mm-hmm. So, one major thing is there's no proof backing the claim that human behavior works in the same way as pigeons and rats. Skinner claimed, and he's very strong about it, he claims that they must be the exact same.
Yeah, basically Skinner focused his research on pigeons and rats.
Animals.
And he theorized, well, humans are also animals, but
facts.
he theorized that behavior is behavior, doesn't matter how far up or down the evolution chain you are.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't really prove that as much.
Yeah.
He just kind of theorized it, which could be a fault of his research then, that maybe operant conditioning only applies to pigeons, for example, and it doesn't work for humans. That isn't the case, but that is one weakness of his work, that he never did prove that.
Mm-hmm.
So another weakness of his work was that he believed that anything we can't see visibly, in other words, anything other than behavior, so for example, thoughts inside the mind, he believed that anything like that was either was irrelevant or just misinformation, and he thought that it doesn't have anything to do with the science of psychology. It doesn't belong in science.
And that's not true.
Yeah, that's not necessarily true. I mean, of course, there's more than one perspective, and we can't just say one's wrong, the other's right. Behaviorism obviously focuses on behavior and not things inside the mind.
Yeah.
But that is one fault that he was so strong about this idea of his.
Yeah, it's a very wide spectrum of it, basically. And what I want to bring up is he has came up with various types of therapeutic techniques, including operant conditioning, which we have spoken about, which have been beneficial for the treatment of disorders like phobias and addictions.
Really?
Yeah, exactly, right?
Wow,
I'm so shook.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
However, they have been proven extremely problematic because apparently also it could be the treatment for autism and homosexuality, which is so wrong.
Yeah, that just really goes to show you incorrect knowledge that they had at this time, and the prejudices, and damn, that they were thinking of treating these things. Wow, that's pretty terrible.
Yeah. And this was 19th century, bro.
Yeah, this was
not that long ago.
No, this was mid 19th century. Could be even later.
It really irks me. Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
No, there's nothing wrong with having
any of those.
Okay? Live your life. And another thing that has been really criticized is which he disturbingly underplayed the role of biology in forging and regulating human behavior, dismissing the burgeoning of behavioral genetics, evolutionary psychology, and cognitive science. Sorry, we said the wrong word. It's burgeoning.
One other thing that we've already kind of talked about is how much of the credit given to Skinner for his theories ignored Thorndike's influence. Skinner was called the father of behaviorism by some. Of course, even then, there was Rogers, who really pioneered behaviorism, but Skinner also brought more to it. So he was often called the father of behaviorism, but he was made famous mostly from Thorndike's theories. For example, like as we've talked about, Thorndike's puzzle box became the operant conditioning chamber, aka the Skinner box. Anyway, taken together, it's kind of clear that his ideas, if applied in the way he envisioned, would likely cause more problems than they would solve. But not to throw Skinner under the bus, as many of his ideas continue to be super helpful and even insightful, given the biases of current times. So, Janet, what do you think of this case study we're looking at here?
Oh, I found it interesting how this case study aims to look at the reasons why students choose to vandalize and its impact, and through how that determines how to take away the variable and make students less likely to vandalize.
Yeah, I can see that they employed Skinner's theories on operant conditioning in order to determine what reinforcers and punishers worked best to halt the behavior, and what environment would best shape behaviors to create individuals who wouldn't vandalize in the first place.
Oh! Yeah, Catherine, this case study really revealed through narratives of the student vandals that the respondents were deeply affected by their experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about some specifics of the research methodology here.
Yes.
Okay, so I can see that this study employed qualitative research, so not quantitative like you would expect for a lot of case studies and stuff in psychology, as we talked about earlier.
For sure.
Just to remind you, Janet, do you know what the difference between qualitative and quantitative research is?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, qualitative research focuses on exploring ideas and formulating a theory or hypothesis, primarily through summarizing, categorizing, and interpreting. But quantitative research, on the other hand, it focuses on testing and confirming theories and hypotheses. So mainly through like calculations and statistical analysis, mainly numbers. So like for qualitative, you might come up with your hypothesis, and through quantitative, you might confirm that hypothesis.
Oh, so that's methods, use, experiences, commentaries, and testimonies from the vandals?
Yeah, in this case, that's exactly what they did, Janet.
Whoa, that's so cool!
Yeah, Skinner's theory, which is to say his theory of reinforcement, was also employed in order to assess the psychological impacts of vandalism, both the gratification that vandals gained from it, as well as the resulting, what compelled them to do so in the first place.
Oh,
and
yeah.
To go over a little bit of just specifics for this one, the targeted respondents, participants, you might say, were high school students from various private and public high schools in Tuguegarao City in the Philippines. Sorry, I'm probably butchering that.
It's all right.
I looked a bit into the results, and it looks like they found out that educators and admin in learning environments like school can be of great help in efforts to decrease and prevent vandalism. School policies and regulations are a large deciding factor. whether or not vandalism occurs in any given scenario. In addition, schools have the capacity to become a would-be vandal's moral compass, defining rights and wrongs for them and ultimately influencing their decision.
Oh, and vandalism is shown to be less prevalent in schools where students feel like they are included and accepted by their school community, right?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, and in schools that do not, however, become frustrated, which invites the possibility of vandalism.
Yep. Unfortunately, vandalism can be an outlet of their frustration instead of dealing with the source of the problem, which is why, because of what this case study found, using the system to prevent them from ever having to deal with that academic frustration can reduce the possibility of there ever being vandalism in the first place.
Oh, and the vandalism is like an outlet to like release stress, basically.
Yeah,
to stand their ground.
Not a very healthy outlet. So
wow,
that's,
I see.
what they're trying to prevent.
So going back to how Skinner ties into this case study, which by the way is called Writing Without Permission, a case study on Skinner's analogy through vandalism, we look at how the author, I'm going to butcher the name, Alma Bangayan Manira, uses Skinner's ideas to propose a solution for high school vandalism. Skinner's theories are employed in this case through the concepts of environmental influence on behavior. Skinner states that to change the individual and their behavior, you must change their environment. And this is reflected through the author's focus on school environment as a factor in changing the behavior of students, vandals.
Wow, that's such an interesting real-world example of how you could use Skinner's theories. I wouldn't have thought of that. Well, looking at these theories so far, my main thoughts have been on, say, training dogs or children, but this is a really great example on how else it might work. So, going to a more fun part, let's look at a few interesting quirks or facts about our star of today's podcast, Mr. B.F. Skinner.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so one fact I know is the BF stands for Burris Frederick.
Wow, that's quite the name.
Right?
I even read in one article, it said his name is B.F. Skinner, full name Burris Frederick, but you can see why they call him BF instead. Damn, what a way to go, you know.
Whoa.
Wonder what his,
Wonder what it stands for. Okay, you want to go with the next fact?
Yeah, I found out that one behavior he was actually able to teach pigeons using his method of operant conditioning was to teach them how to play ping pong.
Sick.
So then you got pigeons playing ping pong.
It's funny. Next fact I heard about, Skinner himself referred to the Skinner box only as a lever box, not a Skinner box.
So even the, most well-known name is not what he came up with.
Exactly.
Well, it makes more sense than if he just named it after himself, I guess. Oh yeah, so Skinner apparently, he was the first psychologist to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award from American Psychological Association, or APA.
Oh, really? APA?
Yeah.
Sick.
Just like APA citations.
Whoa! And lastly, the most interesting fact in my opinion, this guy wrote 21 books.
Wow.
And 180 articles.
And he said he was not a novelist.
Bam.
That sounds pretty close to me.
Yeah.
Wow, thanks for these interesting facts, Janet.
Yeah, thanks. You too,
Learned
Catherine.
a little something new.
Exactly. Yay! So thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening. We hope you learned a lot about B.F. Skinner and his cool operant conditioning.
Exactly. Burris Frederick Skinner.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you want more info, We've got a couple of videos linked below.
Link in description box below.
As well as links for a few images that will help illustrate our concepts and some of the ideas we've spoken about today. You can also find our sources there if you want to know where we got our info.
Exactly. Tune back in next week on the Janet and Katherine Show.